What's up, y'all? That sports guy Jason coming back at you again with another video. It's been a while since I did my first one. I apologize for that. It's had some things come up. That's in the past. We're here now, ready to talk about sports and sports news and things of that nature. And I say we. You may have noticed that it's only my second video, but I have a guest. That's right, folks. With me today is my boy Paul from Illinois. Me and Paul go back to 2007, working at Applebee's, and ever since, especially recently, we've been talking about wrestling behind the scenes. So with today's topic, I figured it'd be good to bring Paul on. Paul, welcome to the crew. Say what's up to everybody.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm glad that I can finally put all this wrestling knowledge that I've had for so many years to use today, finally.
Absolutely. So like I just said, today's topic is going to be about wrestling. And in the world of professional wrestling, there was no bigger news that's happened in the last few days, probably last few decades, actually, than Vince McMahon retiring from his duties from the WWE. No longer is he going to be the CEO. No longer is he going to be the chairman of the board. And for some people, more importantly, he's no longer going to be head of creative behind the scenes with the WWE. This news dropped around 4-ish Eastern on Friday. I didn't hear about it until like 6 p.m. Eastern, a couple hours before SmackDown came on. And of course, I'm sure like many, my jaw dropped. I'm like, what? And of course, you click on every article you can, make sure it's not fake news. And obviously, we know now it definitely was not fake news. So at that point, a lot of people had their opinions, people tweeting this, tweeting that, including Tony Khan. Perhaps, some people might say that was a dick move, what he tweeted out. And if you saw that, we'll talk about that too. But before we go too much further into that, I'll just throw it to you and say, what were your thoughts about him retiring? Initial thoughts and anything you thought of since?
It really shocked me. I know there the allegations and stuff had come out, and there's been some things. And over the last few years, if you paid attention, kind of behind the scenes, people had always talked about how they'd have Raw or SmackDown written, and then Vince would just completely tear it apart, and then they'd redo a new show hours, minutes before the next show happened. But I mean, it's just a shocker. I never thought it would happen. I thought, Vince would have something would have to happen to him physically, mentally. I figured he would just keep on going. He's lasted longer than any of the guys in the business. And if you ask a lot of the wrestlers, they thought he'd go on forever too. Because from what I've read and heard and listened to podcasts and guys talk, he has one of the best work rates in all of them. He'd outwork all of them. He'd be up. I think he's one of those guys that sleeps probably 2 hours a night, and he's always just thinking wrestling because he's been doing it for the last 40, 50 years. So it's just crazy to think that us growing up, he was Mr. McMahon, the evil boss, trying to take Stone Cold down and all that. And now, he's always just been that guy, always been there. We've been to Vince, seen him live and stuff. And it's just the day that Vince not in charge. It's kind of just a very strange day for wrestling.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Like you said, kind of disbelief because you figure the way Vince is such a workaholic. I mean, we've heard stories about him not sleeping, having like meetings with like him, Jim Cornette, Vince Russo, talking about the show like all day long from like 6 a.m. to where street lights are still not even on yet, or they are on, whatnot. And then still working through 6 p.m., 7 p.m. till when Linda came home. So that's when he's a workaholic. He's always in the office. He's always doing this. He's at Gorilla pretty much at every show, especially when he took over NXT from Triple H, which we'll get into that too. So you figure for sure, as much as he loves the company, as he should, because it was his, he's a major shareholder, that I agree with you that you would have figured that the only way he's getting out of this role is when he dies. He's never going to retire. No one's ever going to force him out. Nothing like that. And even with the allegations, they kind of put that in our faces a little bit too when it comes to after the allegations came out and the board said, hey, you need to step down for a little bit or step aside for a little bit. What happened? He was on SmackDown the next day. He was on the following Monday Night Raw. He was on Raw again to announce that John Cena was coming up on the following week's Raw. So it was almost like he's putting in the faces like, hey, yeah, these allegations are here, but I'm not going anywhere. I cannot be the CEO, but you're still going to see me because I'm Vince and I can do what I want. So him not being there definitely is a shock. Now, of course, once this actually happened, and even whenever it would have come up, but he died, everyone's thought was, okay, what's next for WWE? Now that Vince is not in charge of creative, now what can happen? Now the WWE can actually progress when it comes to the on-screen product. And I got to admit, my mind went to that too, and I have some thoughts as well. But I want to hear some from you about what are your thoughts now that Vince is gone, at least officially. What are your thoughts when it comes to what's next for the WWE? Before going to that, just want to point out, people, if you haven't already know, which I'm sure a lot of you do, that kind of put in charge of some of the roles that Vince did had. Like you might have mentioned before, Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, and Nick Khan have been named co-CEOs of WWE, taking over that role for Vince. And technically, this wasn't a Vince role, but Triple H is going to resume his duties as an executive, but he's going to take over the role that John Laurinaitis had because he's also gone from the company as well as head of talent relations. But the role that people really kind of want to know about is who was taking over for creative. I know that's what I was thinking. Is that kind of what you were kind of wondering too? And for me, it seemed like the natural thing would have been Triple H. Now, even though he's in that role of head of talent relations, it may not actually be him. So, Bruce Pritchard, Vince's boy, essentially, is going to be the one who's actually in charge of creative officially. Now, I have to imagine there's going to be a little bit of difference because he's going to be perhaps taking direction from Triple H. Maybe. We don't know. But what are your thoughts about those changes in particular when it comes to the future of WWE, either behind the camera and or in front of it?
Well, behind the scenes, it's very interesting because, for the longest time, you knew that Vince was always had a certain kind of character guy that he liked when build of a wrestler or superstar. We don't say the word wrestler. So you think of over the years, the big guys, big muscles, bigger personalities and stuff. So I could see that changing because, when you saw what Triple H was in charge of NXT, he brought in a lot of the independent guys and those guys that are now, some of them are still with the company and made it up to the main roster. And a lot of them that aren't are within other companies such as AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan. So I can see changes in that. Another thing they've always said, Vince always had kind of a, what are they, like Jim Ross called it, like a sophomore class trip on one of those days DX was doing something that's Vince's humor, that, the potty humor. So I could see that kind of stuff going away from the WWE TV, even though apparently they're going back to TV 14 here for shortly on the ratings, apparently.
Did that become official again? Because I heard when that was announced originally, then I heard that actually wasn't necessarily true, but then I heard it again the other day. So is that actually officially going to be a thing now? Officially?
I haven't seen confirmed, but it's rumored, so I don't know if that's going to change anything. The only thing I can see with that changing is maybe some of the storylines, but maybe the return of blood. I know AEW has had, well, I think their last few main events, they're just bleeding in there. So I don't know if that's something you're going to. I mean, you see it in UFC and other sports, so I mean, it's not that big a thing to me. Maybe to younger viewers, I know maybe they're trying to get away from the kids, which is interesting because back in the '80s, it was garnered towards kids. So honestly, I just think going forward, it's going to be interesting not to see Vince be the face of it because Vince is like wrestling, like. And if you've looked on Twitter or Facebook, just different wrestlers, they're all saying something, hey, my story with Vince is this and this. I think I saw who was it, Pat McAfee wrote something like, you're not perfect, but you're a legend, and you thanked him for everything he given. And I think that's kind of what you got to take with Vince. Without Vince, I don't know if there is wrestling as it is today. And then I was kind of thinking we could talk later some of the things that he inspired further down the road. Like if there's no Vince, is there Hulk Hogan? And if Hulk Hogan, is he a TV star? And then if those TV stars down the road, is The Rock a superstar like he is now, movie stars, John Cena? And so XFL, we could talk about, too, all these things, what Vince started. So, but I think there's going to be some interesting changes coming to WWE. As a fan, I haven't watched a whole lot of WWE, so it might be time to maybe see what goes on just to change it up a little bit if there is some changes and new superstars pushed and such. So. But as a guy that's got a lot of jobs and after school activities and stuff, it's hard to find any time to get any TV in. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, definitely you're a busy guy. You do a lot of things for the job where you work. But also too, you've expressed to me before that you kind of stopped watching it, because there's a time factor, but also that it's kind of gotten, you didn't use this term exactly, but it's kind of gotten stale for you a little bit. Is that, or boring in a way? Is that pretty accurate to say?
I would say so. Like WWE's gotten pretty predictable. Like not to say they haven't created new superstars, but like I don't know the style of wrestling. Like not that I'm saying I like the super high flying or the ultra competitive. I just something different I needed to watch. So that's why I've been watching a lot of AEW. It's just something different. Plus, I thought a lot of those guys they have their YouTube shows, and it kind of you can learn to see the character outside the show. So it's kind of nice to see them on the television show as well. So it's just something different. It's a different look, different camera angles. Kind of just makes the show feel a little bit different. So
Yeah. So a lot of things you hit on, what you said is number one. I agree with you. Just all the great things that Vince has done for wrestling. I think we got to keep all that stuff. We don't have to. Well, definitely that's kind of a separate thing. Vince, as far as what he did for WWE versus all the allegation stuff. But that being said, Vince has done a lot for the WWE and wrestling in the 40 years he's been part of the company. But you can definitely recognize that old school mentality when it comes to a lot of the decisions he made. When it comes to the type of superstar that he would have on TV, you had to have a certain look, certain build, and say to get on the main roster. Also, the name change thing when it comes to, hey, you can't have a Matt Riddle, we got to name him Riddle. Or I'm surprised they hadn't changed Tommaso Ciampa to just Ciampa. Actually, I think they kind of already do. They only call him Ciampa. So that kind of thing there. Um, so the one thing I find the most interesting there is, are they going to go into changing the look of the guys that you have to be on the main roster, Raw and SmackDown? I don't know. We'll see about that, because the thing is, a lot of those guys that probably could have been brought up from NXT to the main roster back from the Black and Gold days, like you mentioned, they're not in the company anymore. Adam Cole, for the moment, Johnny Gargano, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish, people like that as an example, who, maybe, or even Swerve Scott for that matter. All those people left the WWE for whatever reason, or got released, whatever. They're not there anymore. So I guess now I think is a big thing for Triple H and Bruce Pritchard for that matter. What are you going to do now? Because eyes are watching. As we talked about before, off camera, a lot of these AEW contracts are going to be expiring soon if they haven't already. And I saw a post on social media the other day about which one of these guys you think might come back to the WWE. Well, now that's a question. Who will come back? Of course, they mentioned, like I said, Adam Cole, all these other different people. And that's my thought. My thought at the time, why would they come back if they don't think they can get on screen TV? Would Daniel Bryan come back? He might be a different case, for example. But the one big difference between like Daniel Bryan, I told you this before with Adam Cole, is I can look at Daniel Bryan, I can look at Adam Cole. And Adam Cole's taller, but if you told me, hey, look at this guy, Daniel Bryan, he's 215 pounds, I would believe you. If I did that same with Adam Cole, it'd say there's no way. There's no way he's even 190. But that's the guy that Vince wanted. Vince isn't in control anymore. But I'm still kind of wondering, since Bruce Pritchard is the one who's in head of creative, how much of influence is Triple H going to have over that? Is he going to allow Bruce Pritchard to do his own thing? Apparently, Vince gave some type of direction to Bruce on his way out. I don't know what that's going to be. Is Bruce going to be running his own way? Because I have to imagine Bruce Pritchard, even though he's old school like Vince, he still probably has his own idea about how to run a show. So I think that's the most interesting part of this whole change is what are they going to do when it comes to the on-screen persona and character for people when it comes to their name and their look in particular. But that's something to think about too. Real quick, I'm going to let you jump back in here. Is that Comic-Con in San Diego just happened. They had a lot of the AEW guys, people there. And there was a panel up there, and it included other people too, but it was Chris Jericho, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson. There were people there like Britt Baker and Jade Cargill and Ricky Starks. But I would love to have heard their opinions. Actually, and Jade would be a good person for this too, because I know she was supposedly being courted by them. Is what are your thoughts on Vince retiring and the future of the WWE? I would have wanted to ask them that. And I would love, especially Jericho, especially. But but actually I do have a question for you as well. So we talked about the future of the WWE when it comes to the creative side of things. What do you think the morale is going to be with the WWE now? Because I heard a report today, apparently, uh, that a lot of the wrestlers were dejected and detached whenever Vince announced his retirement. We heard Brock's reaction, which we'll get into that too. But what are your thoughts on morale when it comes to Vince leaving? Because despite all the allegations, a lot of superstars who are there anyway seem to love Vince and have good things to say about him. But with that report, kind of made me think: is there going to be an issue here? Do they not like Triple H? Does there issue with Bruce Pritchard? So just when it comes to that, and also the fan reaction, because fans seem to love Vince, and despite the allegations, they were still cheering for him. Whenever time he came out, a lot of pops. And maybe the fans could keep it separated. But what are your thoughts when it comes to morale and also fan, we'll say, perspective when it comes to the Vince retiring and what's going to happen going forward?
Well, it's kind of with Vince, you knew what you were going to get. You know, even though there's maybe like changes, name, stuff like that. He has a certain vision, but you knew what you got from Vince. So for a lot of these guys, it's kind of unknown of what the boss is. Who is the boss? Is it Bruce Pritchard? Is it Triple H? Is it somebody backstage? Paul Heyman's been around for a long time, been in charge of been general manager and done booking and stuff. You have Stephanie McMahon who's done some creative stuff too. There's other people backstage. So I mean, I can see where they're kind of unsure what's going to happen. I mean, and then add to this year too. We've talked a little bit off camera too. This year is just weird because there's how many people on every roster of wrestling is injured. So there's like a lot of guys that aren't ready to go yet, or are they when they come back? Are they going to get pushed back on TV? What's going to happen to them? Vice versa. So there's a lot of that. It's just I think there's a lot of great unknowns right now in wrestling. Like I feel like overall as a product for companies, it's on the rise. I mean, look at the ticket sales have been pretty decent for a lot of the shows of the companies. TV rates. I mean, cable TV is hard to read anymore with the ratings because people watch. Or heck, a lot of times if I miss a show, I can go on YouTube and then within 5 minutes they got the whole clip on YouTube. So as a whole, I think it's just gonna. They don't know what to think. I would be if I was in that situation too. I mean, I've known if I've been in the company 10 years, I've known how Vince is going to run things, and then now you're going to change it up. And then going back to AEW, maybe some of those guys that got burned by Vince or thought they got burned by Vince are welcome to go back. I mean, let's be honest. If Cody Rhodes can go back and get the return, make a push that he was going to get and still probably going to get when he comes back, anybody could do that. I mean, heck, I think even I read like Matt Cardona said Zack Ryder would go back. I mean, it's not like you look at it. I listened actually today to Chris Jericho's podcast a couple of weeks ago. He talked to Clark Connors, New Japan Pro guy that started. He went to Lance Storm, and he's working in New Japan, the USA, and they were both talking. And at the end of the day, they said wrestling is a business. You need to go make your money. That's why we train. That's why we sacrifice is to make the money. So where's the big time money at? Still WWE. I mean, how much did Fox pay SmackDown to get it on Fox? How much did the Peacock pay to get the WWE on there? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. So wrestlers are going to go where the money is, or what? Like some of them, AEW. The one thing I will say for them that they got going, you wrestle on a Wednesday, maybe, and then sometimes they do a live Friday. Usually they tape it on Wednesday, and then a pay-per-view every 8 weeks, 12 weeks. It's a pretty cushy job. So I don't know.
True. I mean, when it comes to AEW, definitely their schedule is lighter, especially now that WWE is doing house shows again. I don't recall if AEW was doing those before. I know they haven't since COVID, but I almost kind of feel like they don't need to because they do enough traveling around for Dynamite and for Rampage, and the crowds are seemingly always sold out for the most part, from what I can tell, despite their higher ticket prices that you and I talked about. But because their product is so much newer in multiple ways compared to Vince WWE, people want to go out and watch it because, like you said, it's something different. And WWE has been accused of being so predictable at times. I, for the most part, haven't seen too much predictability with AEW yet. I kind of feel like it's probably going to happen at some point. But, they're not there yet. So we shall see. But I guess when it comes to any kind of change, creative-wise, that we see on TV, we may see a little bit of difference, perhaps when it comes to promos on this upcoming week's Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, and maybe even NXT. but I really wasn't really expecting anything major to happen. So my question was, is I guess what we'll begin to see is any changes that come up and happen. We're probably not going to see a whole lot coming up on this week on Raw and SmackDown because the storylines built in for SummerSlam, those are already there. We may see certain language changes when it comes to what happens on these shows this week. I don't think we'll see any blood, which I know they went up to the TV 14 if that whenever that's going to happen or come. I think if anything else, we might start seeing more of harder language. Like AEW, they start saying stuff there that you wouldn't think would be on a wrestling show anymore. But I guess when you're PG, like WWE, you can't. But when out your TV 14, maybe you can. We'll see. But
I think they can. What is it? I heard them say after like 9 o'clock on TNT or TBS, they can.
that seems to be right. That seemed to always been that marker, even back before the whole PG thing. Is at 9 p.m. That's when the gloves are off because kids are sleeping at that point, right?
Right. It's not Raw's War. It's Warzone.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I guess when it comes to creative, when it comes to events going forward, another interesting change is going to be, in my opinion, part-time wrestlers. When it comes to how often we start seeing John Cena or The Rock or more particularly Brock Lesnar. We saw Brock Lesnar, he's so connected to Vince that he supposedly stormed out of the arena this past Friday on before SmackDown, even though some people might think it's a work. Um, I don't know if it is or isn't. They kind of promoted the show like he was going to be all over SmackDown, but he wasn't. He was only turned up at the end of the main event to destroy Austin Theory, excuse me.
Yep, can't forget that name.
Yep, Theory. It's Theory. Sorry, it's only Theory. Oh, I still want to see a match between Riddle and Theory. Riddle, Theory. Riddle, Theory. That just sounds kind of funny. So, but with that being said, though, I always kind of feel like Vince, or rather Lesnar, came back more of as a Vince guy because Vince wanted him back. Because obviously he's a draw, clearly. But the whole part-time thing, it seemed like, okay, obviously that's what Brock wants to do, and you're going to pay Brock. But I kind of feel like with that being said, are Triple H and Bruce going to be that heavy on bringing them back for these special shows and special spots? I don't know. So we'll see. That's what I kind of think there, especially since Brock was more tied to Vince. He even said before he walked out, if Vince is gone, I'm gone. They did something to draw him back because they need him, obviously, for the SummerSlam. But after SummerSlam is over, do they really need him? But I guess some of that might be break glass for emergency. Randy Orton's hurt. Cody Rhodes is hurt. So we'll see. But I think that'll be pretty interesting, too. The changes that happen after SummerSlam. That's when we're going to start seeing some things there. What do you think about that?
It's a good point. And then I think back to like when they do like Hall of Fame shows or like reunions, there's some people that Vince has burned that have been in the WWE that won't talk to him. So do those people, some of the kind of those people come back for a reunion show or a Hall of Fame? The part-time thing is interesting because, it always seemed like, oh, we don't have anything going, bring Brock in. Oh, we need somebody, bring Goldberg in for the draw. I could see it, did they come back around? They probably aren't going anywhere because they are a draw and they still can get it going. But I could see it being more for special shows, Saudi Arabia, Mania, SummerSlam, just those kind of not everyday thing. But I mean, even look at Roman. Roman's kind of become kind of a special attraction, which if you go back in time, Hulk Hogan didn't wrestle every night. The titles weren't on the line every night. That's kind of been a modern thing to see more of the championships. They're supposed to be defended at the big pay-per-views and such. So I can see the changes for that. I don't know. But Triple H, we talk about Vince, but Vince has taught Triple H all this. He's been learning from Triple H. His wife is Stephanie. Stephanie is the daughter of Vince. Bruce is one of Vince's guys. I mean, do we think it's really going to change overnight? Probably not. But it might be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, like I say, this slowly because you can't change SummerSlam. And obviously, I don't know what's the next pay-per-view after SummerSlam. Is it Hell in a Cell?
Next pay-per-view is September. You know what? To be honest with you, man, these other than the big four pay-per-views and Money in the Bank, it's hard to keep track of all the ones they have. And Elimination Chamber, obviously. But other than that, I'm not too sure. Obviously, it's one in September, but what it is, I don't know. I can look it up before we go.
Right. Well, I mean, because that's usually how it be. You can remember, January was Rumble, February was No Way Out. Then you had Mania, and then you had Backlash, and then Extreme Rules, and then Money in the Bank, and SummerSlam, Hell in a Cell, all the different ones. So,
Well, so actually, so SummerSlam technically not in August. It's actually July 30th.
which is
But
interesting.
yeah, Saturday. So there's speaking of which, so it seems like these Saturday shows, which I know you said you're a fan of, maybe events idea, who knows? But the next event, which should have known this, was WWE Clash at the Castle in
Oh yeah,
Cardiff, Wales. That's going to be September 3rd on Saturday. So, and we already know what the main event for that's going to be. Well, no, technically we don't. We don't yet because there's still got to be a match between Sheamus and Drew McIntyre this Friday. But in all likelihood, it's going to be Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns at Clash at the Castle. So we're already going to know that. But I guess that would be a good question. What is going to happen from that point? Because now I'm not sure how we're going to know whether or not whatever happens there was more of a Vince idea or not. Because you would think if anybody's going to beat Roman Reigns before WrestleMania, it would be Drew McIntyre at Clash of the Castle on his sort of homeland in the UK. You know,
plus the pop would be insane. It'd be British Bulldog versus Bret Hart at SummerSlam, kind of that huge. Plus, I don't think people would see it coming either. Because Roman's been champ for how many days now?
Well, and see, there's also this other thing potentially about split. Doing like a I can't think of the word, doing like a backdoor slit kind of a thing to say, hey, you beat me, but the match actually was only for the WWE Championship. You can have that. I'm still the Universal Champion, so my streak's still going. Because I still think that they're still holding off potentially Roman dropping the belt to Cody Rhodes. So now obviously we'll see what happens with the Riddle and his briefcase, which I have my thoughts about that, but I don't want to get too far off topic. But now we kind of talk about this in general, but what are your kind of thoughts a little bit when it comes to how Vince retiring may affect AEW? Before you go into your answer there, I do want to bring up Tony Khan's tweet that I mentioned earlier. So shortly after Vince made this announcement at 4:27, Tony Khan put this tweet out. It says, "Thanks to you wrestling fans and your great support of AEW. I'm grateful to now be the longest tenured CEO in pro wrestling. Thank you very much to every single person who watches AEW on TV. See you Friday night, AEW Rampage on TNT, drama, so forth and so forth." So again, some people might say it's a dick move. I don't think it's really that big a deal. I kind of want. Yeah, when I first heard that, I thought I was kind of mad about it. But when after I kind of thought about it, I'm like, you know what? Why not? I mean, it's probably true. So big deal. He's promoting his own show. But I guess another little thing I was thinking about is how would Vince retiring affect AEW? And I have my thoughts on this, but I want to hear a little bit from you when it comes to that. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I could see maybe some like those big WWE names that came over, maybe going back, like we've kind of previously discussed. I don't know. That's a good question. How could they affect things? Maybe there's some ideas that down the road that Vince would have came up with, or Tony comes up with that we want to see crossover. Because we kind of saw that in the COVID era wrestling. Because first it was Tony that kind of put the people around the ring, the extra wrestlers and stuff, and then we saw kind of Vince do the same thing, and then the TVs and all that stuff. But I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. I could just see it possibly just, like I said before, like some guys going back to WWE that wouldn't have because of Vince, or maybe not going back in respect of Vince because they respect Vince and it's not Vince's company anymore. So maybe there's some ties broken there too. So,
well, let's stay on that point. Now that Vince is gone, what current AEW people, and we don't even have to put it just on people who were there before, but what AEW people are currently in AEW now think would either go back to WWE or actually leave AEW to go to WWE now that Vince is gone, who previously might not have gone there. Me personally, the big one that stands out to me potentially is Jade Cargill, because she recently signed a deal to stay with AEW, and she kind of mentioned, when I saw a report, and this is years ago, that not years ago, but a while ago, that some of her reasoning for not going was obviously her comfortability with AEW and her liking it there. But she said there was somebody she talked to, and I don't know if it was Vince in particular, but somebody she talked to said didn't really make her feel right about going there. Like it was something like a contradictory or something to what they said versus what they're actually doing on TV. Um, so she's the first one to stand out to me because personally, I love Jade Cargill. Even though people might say she's still green, which when you have only 35 matches as a single star, that's probably going to be pretty true. But obviously, when you look at Jade, just obviously how she looks, her height, her build, her athleticism, her strength, you think she'd be a perfect person to go to the WWE. For one, she's still relatively young. I gotta look up how old she is, but she's not as old as Charlotte Flair or Becky. So, not saying that Charlotte Flair or Becky are getting close to getting you're retiring or anything like that, but at some point you're gonna have to move past that four horsewoman era. And who's gonna be the next female superstars? You have some young people there. Whether or not they're gonna get pushed, I have no clue. But how cool would it be to have Raquel Rodriguez and her type of wrestling, her body size and everything, and then bring in Jade Cargill also that on that as well. Obviously, one can be on SmackDown, one can be on Raw, whatever. But for me, Jade was that one to say somebody who's currently in AEW who probably would go to WWE now. Now that Vince is gone, now obviously that's presuming the direction creatively is going to change, which I think you and I both agree is probably going to. I'd say Jade. And obviously there's a bunch of others, but I want to see who you think will be those people to jump from AEW, whether they're in WWE before or not, will now move to the big company.
Well, I think of one that's sitting at home, collecting his paycheck, MJF. Now, would he be more of a Vince guy, WWE guy? I don't know. Would he stay in AEW? See, I think he works better in AEW, but maybe that's another reason that some of these TV 14s coming back is pushed because some of his. I don't see MJF as a PG heel. He's got to be a TV 14 plus kind of guy. And then now that you just started talking about Jade, I'm thinking about somebody who just left WWE and is sitting at home. Well, not anymore. That she's doing some appearances. And would she return now to a WWE that changes? And that's the boss, Sasha Banks. Or is that wound still too fresh? Now, down the road, maybe. I mean, because it's the WWE, never say never. But that was with Vince in charge. I don't know about anymore with the WWE. Because, I mean, I've seen guys that refuse to ever go back. I mean, Bret Hart finally came back. I mean, some of the other guys that had burned bridges, they're back. So, I don't know. Is Sasha the next 2 years, 3 years? Probably not, but maybe down the road.
Number one, I don't think there's still been an announcement officially that she's been released.
Right.
I don't know what the deal with that is, but like you said, she's making appearances outside of WWE, so I'll make you think that even though it hasn't been announced that she is gone as of right now. Now that's actually a good point. I did not think about her. That's a good one. So she may actually return to wrestling in WWE now that Vince is gone, which they're obviously going to have to revive those tag titles for the women. They're going to have to do something towards that, and they probably will now. They probably will now. We'll see. But that MJF and her, that's a really good one. So now, well, another potential one, I would say off the top of my head. Now he's not in AEW, so maybe it's somebody I should name. But Killer Cross. I know he's doing the whole control your narrative thing, but like you said, money. His run, how they handled him didn't make any sense. He had everything Vince likes. He had the build. He's a big guy. He had that. Had a fantastic entrance. Vince likes that. He had it. He can come out with a beautiful woman, his wife, Scarlett. He had it. Just for whatever reason, Vince just didn't see that. He got to the main roster, screwed that up. But I feel like he's the type of guy that could work well in WWE, even with the current, thing that WWE has when it comes to that type of build. I can see him going back because again, money. Braun Strowman.
The new Ring of Honor champion, Cesaro, who has nothing. Look at the build of him. He speaks 6 or different languages. That guy should have been a world champion. in WWE, but never got the chance.
I almost feel like now he wouldn't go back just because. I mean, obviously, I don't necessarily think Vince was a problem, quite frankly, but all the time he spent in the WWE, now he's actually getting some respect, we'll say, in AEW or ROH now, whatever. I don't foresee him going back. Um, but just throw some other names out there, not Keith Lee. Um, not well, you know what? Before all these injury stuff, I actually would have thought Kenny Omega might have considered it now at that point because some of the stuff with the way they're doing with Cody, I feel like that's probably one of the biggest selling points they had for anybody jumping from AEW to WWE.
Oh yeah, they had to make it look like you were going to be a star. You're not just any guy off the street. They put him right to Mania. Going to give you the big push. You're wrestling Seth Rollins, a solid guy, former champion. So I mean, they had to make it look good. And yeah, Kenny Omega has stated before his dream is to wrestle AJ at Mania. So
now obviously with the injury thing, I'm not sure what his plans are for wrestling at all. Obviously, he's going to go back to AEW, but we've seen
the rumor is him and the Bucks are supposed to be doing a 6-man, like because that was what the plan was until the injury started with AEW. The rumor was they were going to start the trios style, and it was going to be Adam Cole and Red Dragon versus the Bucks and Omega, but that's kind of gotten pushed because all about four of them injured. The 6 are out with injuries. So Bobby Fish, Bobby Fish is back wrestling. I saw the other night on Dark. So
well, that's good. So yeah, man. So all those people there, Jericho. Now, the one that you kind of got to ponder on the most, I'd say, is CM Punk. At some point, his contract to be done with AEW. We come back to WWE once with Vince gone, maybe just wrestle for one program. You know, get a spot in the Hall of Fame. You know how some people come back to WWE, get in the Hall of Fame, they'll have one match. Why not him? You can probably pick plenty of people on the current roster for him to have that one match with. So, but I think it will be him. I think that'll be one because CM Punk deserves to be in the Hall of Fame with the WWE. As popular as he is, but obviously that's wasn't going to happen unless he came back to WWE, which he wasn't going to do with Vince. But then again, I don't think he's really that big a fan of Triple H either, or vice versa. So maybe not. But I don't know. I kind of don't think Triple H is really that petty compared to Vince. So maybe that could get squashed. I don't know. But yeah. So another thing that we can talk about too, and last thing is bringing it back to this company is what's going to happen with NXT. Now, obviously, Triple H, for his health issues and before Vince took it over, Triple H was running NXT. He was creative for NXT. I don't know if he's going to be doing that again or if it's going to still be Bruce Pritchard. But now, not saying they're going to go back to the black and gold because I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's still probably would be a developmental. I guess the difference is what's going to become of the scripting, the acting there, call-ups for that matter. Because there's been some people who's been on NXT. I'm like, why is this person going to NXT at all? Why hasn't this person been brought up? You know, Io Shirai, even though I guess she's not coming back to the company, Io Shirai, why was she not on the main roster? She's clearly seasoned enough to be there. She's that much better than everybody else on NXT. You know, just that one example. People like LA Knight, why'd he go to NXT at all? Taya Valkyrie or Frankie Monet, why were they going to NXT at all? They're good enough to be on the main roster. People know enough who they are. Send them up. You know, those people, and plus those people were not Ty Valkyrie, but definitely LA Knight. Spent a lot of time with Impact. He owned the footage, so it's not like you can't promote him if need be. And people did know who he was. Or even with Taya Valkyrie, she was John Morrison's wife. Hello, built-in story. You know, Miz's wife, Miz and his wife, John Morrison and his wife, bro. So some of the decisions about who goes to NXT, who didn't get called up, and I kind of feel like that's going to be the big change. They're not going to go away from the 2.0. I think that actually works to some degree, but I think some of the personnel in regards to who's going to get called up to the main roster. So I think that's going to be a big change. What do you think about that? And what's going to happen with NXT?
Well, what you just said there too, with the different superstars, I think what will change is acknowledging, like AEW will acknowledge, hey, this guy was in New Japan and Ring of Honor and WWE. WWE, Impact, what's that? TNA, what was that? Ring of Honor, New Japan. That was a big thing because then that was one of Vince's things, especially after the WCW days. how many of those WCW guys got pushed to the WWE title? Not a whole lot of them because they weren't his homegrown. He didn't make them stars, kind of thing. Now it's changed over the years, but there was a while there where a lot of those guys didn't get the push they got because they weren't WWE, start with or a Vince guy, and so I think will be interesting too going forward. Now, some of those old school thoughts towards Vince had in there for some of the guys that this like that mentioning other companies on TV, even though we had an ECW invasion in '97 and stuff like that. So it's like I don't know. And we've had New Japan guys have come and worked NXT and stuff too. So it'd be interesting to see if that dialogue kind of changes the language and stuff.
Well, now obviously this happened back when Vince was already there, but we kind of saw a little bit of prelude to that when it comes to Mickey James. At the time, the Impact Women's Champion was in the Royal Rumble. Now, obviously, some of that was fashion when it comes to the garbage bag thing. So that might have been like, hey, we apologize for that. Let's do something that's going to be good for both of us. We're going to bring you into the Royal Rumble. You'll be the first person. I won't say first, but you'll be a champion of another company coming to the Royal Rumble. But last night, or rather, this past Friday on SmackDown, Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston were doing commentary during the Viking Raiders match, and Xavier Woods got into some like little mini rant, or whatever, and he mentioned ROH and New Japan Pro Wrestling specifically when it comes to basically making challenges to people. He doesn't care if you were in ROH. He doesn't care if you were in New Japan Pro Wrestling. You can come get this, basically. So even the fact that he mentioned those other companies on live on the air on commentary, obviously people heard him. Even that, now obviously we don't know if he was told to say that or not. We don't know. But I kind of feel like the fact that he was even did that, because like I said, I'm sure Vince made it clear to everybody, don't mention these people at all. So the fact that he even said that seems to me a pretty good symbol that maybe that's one way things are going to change. You can actually mention people, well, maybe not people, but mention other companies, and it's okay. So I remember back when AEW first started, Sami Zayn, probably off the cuff, mentioned AEW during like a fan Q&A in the ring. And I heard he got backlash for that, I'm sure. But that was back when AEW first came out. Whereas now, ROH, there's no reason to hide it. People watch AEW. People watch other stuff now. It's not just WWE. ROH is the thing now. New Japan's a thing. Thanks to AEW. AEW is a thing. So why hide it? I mean, you're not competing. Well, maybe SmackDown is a little bit. You're not really competing with them anymore because you're not on TV at the same time. You're on TV on Fridays on the same day. So why mention it? People are watching. There are people that watch only AEW. There are people who watch WWE. Not to mention, people are going to be turning back to WWE. Like you said, you might start watching WWE now to see what's going to change, what's going to be good and new about it. You're not going to be the only one. There's going to be a lot of people who stopped watching WWE over the last few months. They're now like, huh. Well, now that I got the free time, let me watch Monday nights. Let me watch NXT on Tuesday. Let me watch SmackDown on Friday. So I think that's going to be a key there, and why I think it's going to be very important for the WWE to do things wisely starting after this coming Saturday with SummerSlam, because that's going to be gloves are off, the cap's off. Now you can be the new company, the true post events era, and you can run the company the Triple H way, the Stephanie way, the Nick Khan way, the Bruce Pritchard way, and all things behind the scenes and in front of the camera. So very important what they do in their next steps. I think they're going to do the right thing. I am actually very excited. This week, obviously, I'm going to watch, Monday night and Friday night in NXT, but I'm excited for the following week when we are past SummerSlam. Probably good things going to happen for SummerSlam. Make sure you watch that, folks, on pay-per-view this Saturday. I know I will. I know Paul is. Well, I don't want to call Paul out on the air, but but yeah. So, Paul, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up, but I want to get your final thoughts on Vince retiring from the WWE in all his roles. Although I still think he's going to have some input. He's still a major shareholder. He's still family. So there's that. But I want to hear your final thoughts, sir.
I never thought we'd have the day that there wouldn't be Vince McMahon in charge. I mean, they've said over the years the best characters in wrestling were their own personality turned up to 1,000. And Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon was him turned up to 1,000. And I think people just love to cheer him or jeer him. That's like you said, when these allegations came out, he walked out and people were bowing to him. The people just love that character of Mr. McMahon. And some people say, I can't remember who it was. I've seen so many different shows and listened to podcasts that Mr. McMahon was the greatest heel of all time. As a character, not as a wrestler.
I agree.
Mr. McMahon, that boss, and then the stories wrote itself. How many of people have ever had a bad boss? They'd make him do stuff, and you wanted to always see that guy go flip his boss off and wreck his Corvette, and just things through history. And I think if Vince McMahon doesn't come around, I don't think wrestling's on the national level. We might still have the old territory days. You have the WWF in the North. What does it look like today? I don't know what it is, because he's the one to push it to the national and then to push it globally. And then just think of how big WWE is getting in a lot of countries, especially in Europe. It's very huge. England, obviously, but even other places in Europe where WWE and wrestling haven't been popular. India, I know, is a lot. That's a big market right now for wrestling too, as well. So, and like I said before, do these wrestlers that have crossed over into other multimedias, are they the superstars we have? Is NBC such a huge network now? Because, you think about going back in the day when NBC and Saturday Night's Main Event and building up to the first WrestleMania, and then in a NBC and then the XFL together. Are those things, what does that exist? I mean, obviously we've had other football leagues out there, before, but the XFL, I mean, it's still around. We still talk about it. It came back. It was doing well, and then COVID hit, and now The Rock's got it. We'll see how he does, but there's just so many what ifs if Vince wasn't around. And it's crazy to think that now, he's outlasted how many superstars have come and gone, and he's outlasted all of them. Well, not anymore, but he did.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things thanks to Vince. Definitely the greatest heel, Mr. McMahon, greatest heel. And we also say, what if? I think we wouldn't have AEW if it wasn't for Vince and WWE.
Probably not.
It would. Exactly. So, but folks, thanks for listening. We've had a great time talking about the retirement of Vince and what's next possibly for WWE. Hopefully you enjoyed what we had to say. Leave us your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you like this video and make sure you just subscribe to my channel. We appreciate that. Paul Stutz, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. We appreciate that. And folks, that is another video for That Sports Guy Jason, and this time featuring Paul. Check us out on the next video. Of course, we're going to talk about all things sports. Peace out, y'all.